Now at 5:30, the United Nations Security Council is meeting to discuss U.S. missile strikes in Syria from last night and what happens next. Syrian dictator Bashar Assad called the U.S. bombings reckless and irresponsible. Back in Washington, Republican Senator Marco Rubio had this to say.
Assad is fighting for survival, and I think he's willing to go as far as possible to hold on to power.
Senator Rubio says President Trump now needs to consult with Congress on his next move. To understand the full impact of last night's strikes, it's important to understand the relationship between the U.S. and Syria. Tracy Townsend is in our digital broadcast center with a history lesson.
It's been a rocky relationship since relations were established back in 1944. According to the U.S. State Department, Syria has been on the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism since 1979, and that was when the list was created. Now, relations started to deteriorate back in 2003 for several reasons. First, the U.S. became concerned that the Syrian government failed to prevent the country from becoming a major transit point for foreign fighters entering Iraq. Then, number two, Syria's human rights record. And finally, its pursuit of weapons of mass destruction. Now, the Syrian Accountability and Lebanese Sovereignty Restoration Act, that's called SALSRA for short, was signed in 2004 by then President George W. Bush. It imposed several sanctions on Syria, meant to halt the sponsorship of terrorism and then to give up on those weapons of mass destruction. The Syrian war began in 2011, uprising against Assad, and that was met with brutality. 9 million Syrians, 9 million have been displaced since then. The U.S. has repeatedly called on Assad to step aside. Scott?
Now for local perspective, I talked to the chair of military history at Ohio State, Dr. Peter Mansour. He's not only a military scholar, but also a retired Army colonel who served in Iraq as the executive officer to General David Petraeus. First of all, do you agree with U.S. missile strikes in Syria?
Well, I do. If this is a limited objective attack to prevent Bashar al-Assad from using chemical weapons in the future, then I think this is a reasonable use of force. On the other hand, if the administration wants to expand the conflict and force Bashar al-Assad out of power, then the means they've chosen to do that would be wholly inadequate to the ends.
You were a so-called never Trump Republican, a conservative who publicly opposed his candidacy. Do you think he is ready to handle a crisis like this 3 months in?
I think the team that he has surrounded himself is becoming ready to handle a crisis. Secretary Jim Mattis at the Pentagon, H.R. McMaster as National Security Advisor, really capable people, and they are starting to put together a first-class team. President Trump still is surrounded by guys like Steve Bannon and others who have, let's say, very different views on the use of force and national security than McMaster and Mattis. So,
when we're talking about 50 to 60 Tomahawk missiles, can you put that in perspective in terms of what damage could be done?
I think the number was 59. They have 1,000-pound warheads on them, so that's 59,000 pounds of TNT going into a target. That's a lot of damage. They can destroy, imagine Port Columbus coming under attack by 59 1,000-pound bombs. It would destroy the terminals, destroy the storage facilities for fuel.
So with munitions at that level, that could take out an airport our size?
Yes, I mean, now you can repair the runway pretty quickly, so the airport can get back into operation if it's a military facility for sure. But there will be a lot of damage to all the other facilities that are built up above ground.
I asked Dr. Mansour if Bashar al-Assad can be ousted in Syria, so we're talking total regime change without American involvement. He said that's highly unlikely.